The great council chamber buzzed with the usual noise of galactic politics. Representatives from 47 different worlds sat in their assigned seats, discussing trade routes and mining rights like they had for the past 300 years. But today, something was different. One seat sat empty. Ambassador Min Jihei's chair had been vacant for 3 days now. Her simple message still glowed on the council's main screen. Earth formally withdraws from all galactic treaties and organizations, effective immediately. No explanation. No demands. No angry speeches about unfair treatment. Just a polite goodbye. Counselor Zethkar stretched his long reptilian neck and looked at the empty human section with mild annoyance. His green scales caught the chamber's soft light as he shook his head. Humans were always so emotional about everything. They probably got upset about something trivial and decided to throw a tantrum. The human withdrawal changes nothing important. Zethkar announced to the other council members. We can adjust our trade agreements and continue normal business. Several other councilors nodded in agreement. The humans had been more trouble than they were worth anyway, always bringing up strange concerns about empty space sectors. Always asking for more monitoring stations in areas where nothing important happened. Always talking about dark signals and reality distortions that their advanced sensors never detected. Veltar, the insectoid navigator, clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. The humans seemed very concerned about deep space monitoring. They asked about it in every session. Paranoid nonsense. Zethkar replied with a dismissive wave of his clawed hand. Our scientists analyzed their so-called evidence multiple times. Empty space is empty space. There are no mysterious threats hiding in the void. The council moved on to discussing mineral extraction rights in the Andromeda Spiral. The humans had controlled several mining operations there, but those could easily be transferred to more reliable species. Everything would actually run more smoothly without human interference. As the day continued, more reports came in about human activities throughout the galaxy. Human settlements were packing up and leaving, not in panic or anger, but with calm efficiency. They completed their work contracts, paid their debts, and quietly departed. Human-operated space stations powered down after transferring operations to local authorities. Human research teams submitted final reports and closed their laboratories. It's like they planned this for months, said Counselor Thex, a blue-skinned humanoid from the Vega system. Everything is too organized to be a sudden decision. Zethkar shrugged. Humans are good at organization. It's probably the only thing they're good at. Zethkar shrugged at organization. The other counselors laughed at his joke. Humans were known for their strange obsession with planning and preparing for problems that never happened. They built extra safety systems, created backup plans for their backup plans, and worried about threats that existed only in their imagination. Dr. Kel Run, the council's chief scientist, approached the main podium with a confused expression on his gray face. Counselors, we're receiving some unusual sensor readings from Earth's solar system. What kind of readings? Zethkar asked. The entire system appears to be moving. The gravitational signature is shifting position very slowly. The chamber fell silent for a moment. Then, several counselors began laughing. Stars don't move, Dr. Kelrun, said Counselor Thex. Check your equipment. We've checked everything 3 times. The readings are consistent across all our monitoring stations. Zethkar stood up, his full height making him tower over most other representatives. Dr. Kell, run. With respect. Your sensors are malfunctioning. Stellar objects don't simply relocate themselves. Have your technicians run a full diagnostic and report back tomorrow. Dr. Kell Run bowed slightly and left the podium, but his worried expression remained. The council returned to their normal business discussions. Navigator Veltar quietly accessed her personal datapad and began checking hyperspace route calculations. Something felt wrong about the space lanes near former human territories, but she couldn't identify the problem yet. Her species had evolved excellent spatial awareness over millions of years. When something changed in space, they usually felt it before their instruments detected it. 3 days later, the first deep space monitoring station went offline. Station Gamma 7, located in what humans had called a critical observation zone, simply stopped transmitting. The Council assumed equipment failure and dispatched a repair crew. The repair crew never arrived. Their ship's navigation system malfunctioned in the Gamma 7 sector, forcing them to turn back after experiencing what they described as impossible sensor readings. More strange reports followed. Commercial vessels reported navigation errors in areas that had been perfectly stable for centuries. Hyperspace jumps took longer than expected, or sometimes arrived early. Some ships reported seeing other vessels that didn't appear on their sensors. Ships with designs that looked wrong somehow. All these incidents happened in sectors that humans had repeatedly asked to monitor more carefully. Sectors the Council had dismissed as unimportant, empty space. Zethkar reviewed the correlation data in his private office, his green eyes narrowing as he studied the patterns. Every false alarm location that humans had reported over the past 50 years was now showing some kind of anomaly. It was probably just coincidence. Space was vast and strange things happened sometimes. But deep in his mind, a small voice whispered that perhaps the humans had seen something the rest of them had missed. Ambassador Min Jihei's final diplomatic message played again on his personal screen. Her calm face showed no anger or frustration, just a deep sadness that he hadn't understood at the time. "We cannot protect those who will not see the danger," she had said. "We hope you will forgive us for what we must do next." At the time, Zethkar had thought she was being typically dramatic. Now, as he looked at the growing list of unexplained incidents, he wondered if those words meant something else entirely. Outside his office window, the stars looked the same as always, beautiful, distant, and eternal. But somewhere, in the deep space between those stars, something was moving in the darkness. Something the humans had been watching. Something they had been fighting. And now the humans were gone. 2 months had passed since humanity's quiet departure, and the galaxy was learning to function without them. Trade routes had been adjusted. Former human colonies were being resettled by other species. And life continued as normal. Or so, the Galactic Council believed. Navigator Veltar stood in her ship's control room, studying the hyperspace charts with growing concern. Her insectoid eyes, designed to process complex spatial relationships, detected patterns that her instruments couldn't measure. The space lanes near former human settlements felt different now. Wrong, somehow. "Captain," she called to her ship's commander, "I recommend avoiding the Proxima corridor for our next jump." Captain Rex Tar looked at her with confusion. "The corridor has been stable for 3,000 years, Navigator." "Why the concern?" Veltar's mandibles clicked nervously. "Something feels displaced. The gravitational currents don't flow the same way they used to." "Show me the sensor data," Rex Tar demanded. Veltar displayed the readings on the main screen. Everything appeared normal, according to their instruments. The gravitational fields measured within acceptable ranges. The hyperspace entry points showed no irregularities, but her natural spatial senses screamed warnings that their technology couldn't detect. "I see nothing wrong," Rex Tar said. "We'll proceed as planned." The jump through Proxima Corridor lasted 17 hours instead of the usual 12. When they emerged, their chronometers showed different times. Their position calculations were off by 3 light years, and half the crew reported strange dreams during the journey. Dreams of vast shapes moving in the darkness between stars. Similar reports were flooding into the Galactic Council from across known space. Commercial ships experiencing time distortions. Military patrols finding empty space where planets should be, then finding the planets again hours later. Entire star systems flickering in and out of sensor range like cosmic lighthouses. Every incident happened in locations that humans had marked as areas of concern in their old reports. Dr. Kelrun stood before the council once again, his gray skin pale with worry. Counselors, we need to discuss the human research files. Specifically, Dr. Sarah Kim's final submission before Earth's withdrawal. Counselor Zethkar leaned back in his chair. Dr. Kim's work was reviewed and rejected by our best scientists. Her theories were mathematically impossible. I've been re-examining her calculations, Dr. Kelrun said quietly. In light of current events, some of her predictions are proving accurate. The chamber stirred uneasily. Dr. Sarah Kim had been one of Earth's most persistent scientists, constantly submitting papers about cosmic background radiation anomalies and something she called reality cascade failures. The galactic scientific community had dismissed her work as human paranoia, combined with flawed mathematics. Show us, Zethkar commanded. Dr. Kelrun activated the main display, showing Dr. Kim's final research presentation. Her kind face appeared on the screen, looking tired but determined as she delivered her last warning to the galactic scientific community. For the past 2 centuries, my team has detected pattern irregularities in cosmic background radiation, Dr. Kim's recorded voice explained. These patterns suggest massive objects manipulating space-time on an intergalactic scale. Objects that exist partially outside our normal dimensional framework. The recording continued with complex mathematical models and sensor data that had seemed impossible when first presented. Dr. Kim showed evidence of entities that could phase in and out of normal space. Creatures that fed on organized energy and consumed entire civilizations by erasing them from reality itself. The threat is approaching from beyond our galactic rim, Dr. Kim had warned. My calculations show they will arrive within the next 5 years. We need to establish monitoring stations and defensive barriers at the coordinates I'm providing. Those coordinates perfectly match the locations where monitoring stations were now going offline. Counselor Thex stood up slowly. Are you suggesting that Dr. Kim was right? That there really are hostile entities approaching our galaxy? Dr. Kelrun nodded grimly. I'm suggesting that every human warning we ignored might have been an attempt to save us all. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. For decades, humans had been trying to warn them about a threat they couldn't perceive with their advanced technology. A threat that required the strange human ability to see patterns in chaos and prepare for impossible dangers. But where are the humans now? Asked Navigator Veltar. If they knew about this threat, why did they abandon us instead of staying to help? Dr. Kelrun switched to new data on his display. We've been trying to contact Earth for clarification, but we've discovered something disturbing. Earth's solar system is no longer where it should be. The image showed empty space where humanity's homeworld had orbited for billions of years. No debris, no sign of destruction. The entire solar system had simply vanished, leaving only empty void and confused astrophysicists. How is that possible? Zethkar demanded. We don't know, Dr. Kelrun admitted. But the gravitational disturbance patterns match some of Dr. Kim's theoretical models for defensive barrier construction. More reports came in as the council session continued. Commercial vessels were encountering unknown ships in deep space, vessels with designs that hurt to look at directly. These ships didn't respond to communication attempts and seemed to phase in and out of normal space at will. The few visual contacts showed geometric patterns that violated known principles of physics. Shapes that existed in too many dimensions, structures that seemed to fold in on themselves while expanding outward, designs that made experienced spacers feel sick just by observing them. The unknown vessels appear near coordinates that match human monitoring station requests from the past century, reported Admiral Vex Sun, the Council's military commander. Every location the humans wanted us to fortify is now showing signs of incursion. Zethkar stared at the data streaming across the displays. The pattern was undeniable. Every human concern Every paranoid request, every rejected proposal had been an attempt to prepare for something that was actually coming. Ambassador Minji Hei's final words echoed in his memory. We cannot protect those who will not see the danger. The humans hadn't abandoned them out of anger or frustration. They had left to face something alone, something they had been fighting in secret, while the rest of the galaxy dismissed their warnings as paranoid delusions. Dr. Kell Run, Zethkar said slowly. How much time do we have? The scientist checked his calculations one more time, hoping for a different answer. According to Dr. Kim's models, and based on current incursion rates, the main threat will reach our core worlds within 6 months. The council chamber erupted in panic and shouted arguments. But through the chaos, one thought kept echoing in Zethkar's mind. The humans had known this was coming, and they had tried to save everyone, even those who had refused to listen. Now humanity was gone, and the galaxy faced a threat it didn't understand with defenses it had refused to build. The abandoned human research station orbited a dead moon in the outer rim, its lights still blinking despite being empty for 3 months. Dr. A. Kellrun's investigation team approached carefully, their sensors detecting strange energy readings that shouldn't exist in normal space. The station appears fully operational, reported Lieutenant Voss from the scanning station. All systems are running, but there are no life signs aboard. All. Dr. Kellrun studied the readings on his screen. The humans had left everything behind when they evacuated. Their computers, their research data, their classified files. It was like they wanted someone to find what they had been working on. Take us in for docking, he ordered. The station's interior was clean and organized, typical of human efficiency. But the research laboratories contained evidence of work that the galactic community had never suspected. Wall-mounted displays showed star charts marked with defensive positions, battle reports from conflicts that had never been announced, and communication logs with ships operating in supposedly empty space. Dr. Kell Run accessed the main computer terminal and found files labeled Void Hunter Encounters. His hands trembled as he opened the first report. Captain Chenwei's face appeared on the screen, his expression grim but determined. Behind him, the bridge of his ship showed damage from some kind of battle. Sparks fell from damaged consoles, and his crew worked frantically at their stations. Mission log, day 412, Captain Chen reported. The Void Hunters attempted another probe into Sector 7 Gamma today. We managed to drive them back, but they're learning our tactics. Each encounter shows increased coordination and adaptation. Dr. Kell Run felt his blood turn cold. Sector 7 Gamma was where the Council's first monitoring station had gone offline. The humans had been fighting something there for over a year, and no one in the galaxy had known about it. The next file showed battle footage that defied understanding. Human ships fired weapons at empty space, their energy beams seeming to hit invisible targets that exploded in bursts of impossible light. Enemy vessels phased in and out of reality, their hulls made of materials that bent space around them. Some enemy ships appeared to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, attacking from directions that didn't exist. The Void Hunters exist partially outside our dimensional framework, Dr. Sarah Kim's voice explained from another file. They feed on civilizations that have reached technological and social stability. Advanced societies, with perfect balance between progress and order, represent ideal feeding conditions. Dr. Kell Run realized with growing horror that she was describing the Galactic Council itself. 47 species working in perfect harmony, each civilization having reached its optimal development level, the entire galaxy functioning as a balanced ecosystem of advanced societies. They were exactly what these entities wanted to consume. More files revealed the true scope of humanity's secret war. For 2 centuries, human ships had been patrolling the void beyond the galactic rim, engaging hostile forces that other species couldn't detect. Human settlements at seemingly random coordinates were actually fortress monitoring stations, watching for incursions and fighting battles that the rest of the galaxy never knew happened. The Void Hunters have been systematically weakening the barriers between dimensions, Captain Chen explained in another report. They target the gravitational anchor points that keep our reality stable. Each successful probe makes the next incursion easier. Dr. Kell found technical manuals describing barrier maintenance, reality stabilization procedures, and dimensional anchor construction. The humans had developed technology that worked on principles the galactic scientific community didn't even recognize as possible. But the most shocking discovery came in Ambassador Min Ji-hei's classified diplomatic files. Every human request to the Galactic Council had been a carefully disguised plea for help in the secret war. Requests for deep space monitoring stations were attempts to get other species to help maintain the barriers. Proposals for increased military patrols were efforts to recruit assistance in fighting the Void Hunters. The Council had rejected every proposal, dismissed every warning, and ignored every attempt to share critical intelligence about the approaching threat. "We cannot reveal the full truth without causing galaxy-wide panic," Min Ji-hei had written in her final report. "If the population learns about the Void Hunters, the resulting fear and chaos will destabilize the dimensional barriers further. We must continue fighting alone while trying to prepare others indirectly." The humans had been trapped in an impossible situation. They couldn't reveal the enemy without making the situation worse, but they couldn't defeat the enemy without help from species who refused to believe the threat existed. Dr. Kell found the final set of files, dated just days before humanity's departure. The Void Hunters had learned to track human defensive positions, following them back toward inhabited space. The entities were using humanity's own protection efforts to map paths into the galaxy's core regions. "We have discovered tracker organisms attached to our ships," Captain Chen's last report revealed. "The Void Hunters are learning our patrol routes and using them to plan their invasion paths. Every time we defend a position, we inadvertently show them how to reach the next target." The solution the humans had chosen was as brilliant as it was heartbreaking. Earth's entire solar system had been converted into a massive dimensional anchor, a final barrier powered by their homeworld's gravitational field. By leading the Void Hunters away from the galaxy and positioning Earth as the ultimate target, humanity planned to create a containment field that would trap the entities in deep void space. "We calculate a 73% chance of successful containment if we can lure the main hunter fleet away from galactic approach vectors," Dr. Kim's final analysis showed. "The cost will be Earth and every human ship in the defensive fleet, but it will buy the galaxy approximately 50 years to develop better defenses." Dr. Kell stared at the data in stunned silence. Humanity hadn't abandoned the galaxy. They had sacrificed themselves to save it. Every human who left their homes and jobs had been taking position in a defensive grid that would cost them their lives. The final message in the files was from Ambassador Min Ji-hei, recorded just before Earth's departure. "To whoever finds this information," she said, her calm face showing the weight of terrible knowledge, "please understand that we did not want to leave you. For 200 years, we tried to warn your people about the approaching threat. We hoped to fight together, to share the burden of protection. But the Void Hunters learn quickly, and our presence was leading them toward the worlds we sought to protect." She paused, looking directly at the camera with eyes that held both sorrow and determination. "We have left defensive barrier generators hidden throughout the galaxy, at coordinates included in these files. They will provide limited protection if the containment fails. We have also included all our research on Void Hunter weaknesses and defensive technologies. Learn quickly, prepare well, and if you remember us, know that we chose this willingly." The message ended, leaving Dr. Kell alone in the empty station with the weight of humanity's sacrifice. Through the viewport, he could see the deep space where human ships were making their final stand, fighting impossible odds to protect a galaxy that had never known it needed protection. He gathered the data files and prepared to return to the Council. They needed to understand what the humans had done, and why. But more importantly, they needed to prepare for what was coming if the human sacrifice failed to contain the Void Hunters completely. In the distance, space itself seemed to flicker as reality bent around forces that shouldn't exist. The final battle was beginning. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened at dawn, but the chamber felt darker than the deepest night. Kelrun had shared his discoveries from the Human Research Station, and now 47 different species sat in stunned silence, trying to understand the magnitude of humanity's sacrifice. Counselor Zethkar stared at the evidence displays with scales that had turned pale gray. How long do we have before the main threat arrives? According to human calculations, 6 months. Dr. Kelrun replied quietly. But that assumes their containment strategy works perfectly. 2. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. 6 months to prepare for an enemy they couldn't understand, using defensive techniques they had never studied, against entities that existed outside the normal rules of reality. Then the first core world died. The alerts came simultaneously from every monitoring station in the galaxy. Zephyria Prime, home to 60 billion enlightened beings, had simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not conquered, not even damaged. Erased. The entire star system had been deleted from reality itself, leaving only empty space where a thriving civilization had existed for millennia. How is this possible? Admiral Vexsun demanded, his military training unable to process such a complete impossibility. Dr. Kelrun studied the sensor readings with hands that shook uncontrollably. The gravitational signatures just stopped. No debris, no radiation, no trace that anything ever existed there. Navigator Veltar's compound eyes reflected the chamber's emergency lighting as she processed her species' natural spatial awareness. I can feel the absence, she whispered. There's a hole in space where Zephyria should be. Not empty space, but nothing. A place where reality has been torn away. More alerts flooded the communication systems. Worlds throughout the galaxy reported reality distortions on their borders. Ships phased through planets that should be solid. Stars flickered in and out of existence. Gravity flowed in directions that didn't exist. The fundamental laws of physics bent and broke as entities from outside normal spacetime began manifesting inside the galaxy. Panic spread through the core worlds as populations realized their technology couldn't fight an enemy that operated beyond the rules of reality. Energy weapons passed harmlessly through Void Hunter constructs. Shields failed against attacks that struck backwards through time. Military strategies crumbled against entities that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. We need to implement human defensive protocols immediately, Dr. Kelrun announced. Their research files include barrier generator specifications and reality stabilization techniques. Counselor Thex stood up, her blue skin reflecting the panic in her voice. How can we build devices we don't understand based on science we never studied? Our best engineers need years to comprehend human technology. We don't have years, Zethkar replied grimly. We don't even have months. The Council's most brilliant scientists worked frantically to decode human defensive techniques, but they lacked centuries of experience fighting an enemy that operated outside normal causality. Every human innovation was built on previous discoveries that the galactic community had never made. Their barrier generators required understanding of dimensional mathematics that other species had dismissed as impossible. Reports from the Rim territories painted a picture of approaching doom. Massive energy signatures moving in from the deep void. Reality storms preceding invasion fleets that dwarfed anything in recorded history. The Void Hunters weren't just returning, they were arriving in overwhelming force, no longer cautious about human interference. The entities approaching our core systems aren't the main invasion force, reported Intelligence Officer Dex Mill. Long-range sensors detect something enormous gathering in the space between galaxies. The signatures are too large to measure accurately. Admiral Vexsun pulled up tactical displays showing enemy movement patterns. The current incursions are testing our defenses, learning our capabilities. They're preparing for a harvest operation. The word harvest sent chills through the chamber. Dr. Kim's files had described how void hunters consumed civilizations, not just destroying them but erasing them from existence so completely that they might never have existed at all. Every achievement, every work of art, every memory would be deleted from reality itself. Then came humanity's final transmission. The signal arrived, distorted by impossible distances and dimensional interference, broadcast from somewhere in the deep void beyond the galactic rim. Captain Chenwei's voice, stretched thin by forces that shouldn't exist, delivered humanity's last message to the species they had died protecting. To the Galactic Council, his barely recognizable voice began. This is Captain Chenwei, broadcasting from what used to be Earth's position. We are engaging the main Void Hunter fleet at the secondary containment line. Static filled with sounds that hurt to hear interrupted the transmission. When Chen's voice returned, it was weaker, but determined. Our primary containment failed 12 hours ago. Earth held them for 18 hours before the barrier collapsed. We're falling back to positions, powered by our ship's life support systems. Each vessel lost adds time to the containment field, but we're running out of power sources. The transmission showed visual data that broke the hearts of every council member. Human ships, outnumbered by millions to one, held impossible defensive positions around empty space. They weren't fighting for territory or resources. They were buying time with their lives, each death powering barrier generators that existed more in human determination than actual physics. The Void Hunters feed on perfection, Chen continued, his voice growing fainter. They consume civilizations at their peak development, but they cannot process sacrifice. The concept of choosing death to save others doesn't exist in their reality structure. It creates paradoxes in their feeding process. Dr. Kellrun realized what humanity had discovered. The Void Hunters couldn't consume a species that had evolved beyond self-preservation instincts. They couldn't harvest civilizations that willingly chose extinction to protect others. We've prepared emergency shelters throughout the galaxy, Chen's final message revealed. The coordinates are in our research files. Basic barrier generators. Supplies for rebuilding. Enough for survivors to restart civilization if they learn to think differently. The transmission included one last gift. The location of hidden bases humanity had constructed in secret, equipped with supplies and basic defensive technology. But more importantly, they contained teaching materials about the human way of thinking that made species immune to void hunter harvesting. The entities can only consume civilizations focused on individual or species survival, Chen explained. They cannot harvest communities that value others' survival over their own advancement. Become gardeners, not conquerors. Protectors, not competitors. Choose love over logic. Sacrifice over survival. As the message ended, sensors detected massive energy cascades in the deep void. The Void Hunter's main force was meeting humanity's final defensive line. The gravitational distortions were visible from across the galaxy, reality itself bending under forces beyond measurement. Then, suddenly, silence. The sensor readings went flat. The reality distortions stopped. The approaching invasion fleet simply vanished from long-range detection. Counselor Zethkar stood in the empty chamber, understanding finally dawning. Humanity hadn't just fought the Void Hunters. They had transformed themselves into something the entities couldn't consume, then used that immunity to contain the threat beyond the galactic rim. The humans were gone, but their sacrifice had bought the galaxy something more precious than time. They had bought the chance to grow beyond the developmental stage that made civilizations prey to cosmic horrors. In the emptiness where Earth once orbited, something appeared that hadn't been built by any surviving species. A small monument, written into reality itself. Its message visible to every form of perception. They chose love over logic. Sacrifice over survival. The galaxy was protected by those who asked nothing in return. 3 months passed after humanity's final transmission, and the galaxy slowly began to understand what silence meant. No more reality distortions. No more ships phasing through solid matter. No more stars flickering out of existence. The Void Hunters were gone, contained somewhere beyond the galactic rim by humanity's ultimate sacrifice. Counselor Zethkar stood in his private chambers, looking out at stars that seemed brighter somehow. The memorial monument that had appeared where Earth used to orbit glowed softly in the distance, its impossible presence a reminder of what the galaxy had lost and what it had gained. The human research files had become the most studied documents in galactic history. Every species was trying to understand the science behind dimensional barriers and reality stabilization. But more importantly, they were trying to understand the thinking behind humanity's choice. How did they do it? Navigator Veltar had asked during the Council's last session. How did an entire species choose extinction to save others? Dr. Kell Runn had spent weeks studying human psychological profiles and historical records. They evolved past the survival instincts that make civilizations vulnerable to void hunter harvesting, he explained. They learned to value others' survival over their own advancement. The concept was alien to most galactic species. Every civilization had reached their current development level through competition, advancement, and the drive to survive and prosper. The idea of deliberately choosing extinction seemed impossible to understand. But the human shelters throughout the galaxy were teaching a new way of thinking. Zethkar had visited the shelter in his home system, hidden in the asteroid belt where human scientists had worked in secret for decades. The base contained enough supplies to support a small population for years, along with basic barrier generators and defensive technology. But the most valuable resources were the teaching materials. Protection without recognition. Read one of the human instruction manuals. Service without reward. These concepts form the foundation of immunity to existential predation. The humans had discovered that void hunters couldn't consume civilizations that had learned to think like gardeners instead of conquerors. Species that focused on protecting others rather than advancing themselves created paradoxes in the entity's feeding process. Dr. Sarah Kim's final research papers explained the science behind this immunity. Void hunters exist by consuming organized energy patterns that represent peak civilization development, she had written. But they cannot process energy patterns based on self-sacrifice and protection of others. Such patterns create logical impossibilities in their reality structure. The surviving species were slowly learning to implement this protection. Instead of competing for resources, they began sharing them. Instead of advancing their own interests, they started protecting weaker civilizations. Instead of seeking perfect efficiency, they chose deliberate inefficiency that prioritized others' welfare. It was hard work. Billions of years of evolutionary programming fought against every decision to put others first. But the alternative was too terrible to consider. The void hunters were still out there. Contained but not destroyed. Human technology could hold them for perhaps 50 years. Maybe longer, if the barriers were maintained properly. But eventually, they would find ways around the containment. The galaxy needed to be ready. We must become what humanity was, Zethkar had announced during the first memorial session. Not warriors, not diplomats, not even protectors in the traditional sense. Gardeners, tending a galaxy that may never know it needs our care. The change was already beginning. Trade agreements now included provisions for protecting primitive civilizations. Military forces were being restructured around defense rather than conquest. Scientific research focused on shared advancement rather than competitive advantage. Navigator Veltar had volunteered for the first deep space monitoring mission, following human patrol routes to maintain the barrier systems. Her ship carried a mixed crew from 12 different species, all learning to work together the way humans had tried to teach them. It's strange, she had reported during her last communication. The space out here feels different now. quieter, but somehow safer. Like humanity's presence is still protecting us. Dr. Kell Runn continued studying human technology, trying to understand defensive systems that operated on principles of sacrifice rather than force. The barrier generators worked by channeling life energy into dimensional stabilization fields. They required operators willing to give years of their lives to power the shields protecting others. Volunteers stepped forward from every species. Not many at first, but enough to begin understanding what humanity had felt when they chose to power their final containment field with their own existence. The memorial monument grew brighter each day, fed by the collective gratitude of species learning to survive by protecting others. It served as both a reminder of humanity's sacrifice and a beacon for those still learning to think beyond self-preservation. Ambassador Min Ji-hae's final diplomatic message played in council sessions each week, her calm voice explaining the choice her species had made. We cannot protect those who will not see the danger, 1 per meter per 10, but we can show them how to protect themselves. The humans had done exactly that. By sacrificing themselves, they had demonstrated the thinking required to survive in a universe where the greatest threats fed on competitive advancement and individual success. Councillor Thex established the first interspecies protection treaty, binding 12 civilizations to defend primitive worlds that couldn't protect themselves. The agreement required each signatory to sacrifice resources and military assets for others' benefit, creating the same paradoxical energy patterns that made civilizations immune to void hunter harvesting. The galaxy was learning to be human. Children of all species now learned about Earth's vanished heroes in their schools. They studied cooperation instead of competition, service instead of success, protection instead of conquest. The lessons were hard to accept at first, but they became easier as new generations grew up understanding that survival meant caring for others more than yourself. Zethkar touched the communication device in his chambers and sent a message toward the deep void where Earth had made its final stand. He knew no one would receive it, but the gesture felt necessary. We understand now, he said to the empty space between stars. We're learning to be gardeners, learning to protect without recognition, serve without reward. The galaxy you saved is becoming worthy of your sacrifice. The stars seemed to twinkle in response, or perhaps it was just atmospheric interference. But in the silence that followed, Zethkar felt something he had never experienced before. The peace that comes from knowing someone else's welfare matters more than your own survival. Humanity was gone, but their way of thinking lived on, in species learning to love strangers more than themselves. The Void Hunters remained contained beyond the galactic rim, held back by barriers powered by the same force that had driven humans to choose extinction over abandoning their duty. Love, sacrifice, the courage to protect others even when no one would ever know. In the end, humanity's greatest gift wasn't their technology or their warnings or even their sacrifice. It was the lesson that the strongest civilizations were built not on advancement, but on the willingness to give everything for those who could never repay them. The galaxy was finally learning to comprehend the terror of losing its silent guardians, and in that understanding, it was becoming something worthy of their protection.